certain times with personalisation. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background on myself and Intellify and what we do. Take a look at what's happening to sales at the moment during the current crisis. Let's talk a bit about the return on investment that you can expect from implementing personalisation projects. Then we're going to dive right in and look at channels where personalisation works. We're going to have a look at some of the market leaders and use examples of and screenshots of examples of what they're doing with their personalisation. And then we'll look at what's changed in terms of the cost of implementing these type of projects and how some of the cloud provider tools is really helping lower that cost. And lastly, I'm going to touch on some of the common mistakes that people make and how you get started when you're starting this kind of project. So for myself, my name's James Triggs. I'm a delivery lead with Intellify. I've got 20 years experience in a variety of roles across product management, project management, and also strategy and business operations roles. I've had quite a bit of my experience has also been in the e-commerce space, a whole bunch of different industries, everything from quite traditional industries working in the trade sectors and building e-commerce sites for trade companies, right through to pure business to consumer companies, global online platforms and things like that. So I've had a fair bit of experience running this kind of thing. And just touching very quickly on Intellify. So we're an AI and machine learning consultancy. And I guess what we found is that for a lot of companies that wanted to get into AI and machine learning, they found it really hard to build the skills and experience to be able to do that. So as you know, it's really challenging in the marketplace to go and hire data scientists and data engineers and that sort of thing. So we've got a team of over 20 data scientists and data engineers, and we solve this problem by partnering really closely with both the technology side of the business and the business stakeholders in order to get solutions into production. And that's where we really focus, is trying to not just build models and produce slides and things like that, but actually get this integrated with real business systems. To date, we've implemented over 100 different solutions, and commonly out of this, we'll see double to triple the performance from implementing a machine learning solution. There's three ways we kind of help. First is strategic advisory. So, for example, right now we're helping the state government define a strategic roadmap around AI in one of their departments. Or we can help with consulting and execution, where we actually, if you've got existing data scientists, we can come in and partner with the existing team and help take some of their work and get it into production systems. Or we can do end-to-end implementation. So if you've got a particular problem area, we can solve that with machine learning. And finally, managed services, where we ongoing just can keep an eye on your models and make sure they're still delivering the same business results that we originally found. We've delivered outcomes across a number of different areas. So recommendation engines is a key one. We do quite a lot of these. I've been doing one right now with an industrial products company. Through time series forecasting, a lot of our projects are in time series forecasting. Another recent example, so for a large health insurer, we recently were able to deliver a 370% increase in the accuracy of their forecasting, right through to the more advanced computer vision and other sort of marketing optimization and pricing optimization kind of projects. So we really run across the whole range. So let's get into the content. If we look at what's happening right now, obviously with COVID-19, it really is a sort of a one in 100-year event, and it's causing a massive amount of disruption. I captured some of these headlines, these first headlines about 6 or 8 weeks ago. And on this particular day, there are 100,000 employees that were laid off in Australia in the retail sector due to coronavirus. But at exactly the same time, Amazon.com is hiring 100,000 warehouse and delivery workers to try and help keep up with the demand for online purchases that was growing so quickly. So clearly there is a bit of a shift that's right now happening because of the constraints that people are moving online. But more recent articles, if you look at this in the Sydney Morning Herald, Woolworths has recently had to double their online capacity. And what they're calling out is that they're expecting it to be more of a sustained spike in online demand. So this is not just a passing thing. They think it's going to stay that way. And over the year, they're expecting a $3 billion sales shift towards the online channel. So clearly there's a pattern change there. Looking at other articles in Forbes, you know, they did a bit of research on the impact of coronavirus on brands and retailers. And what they're saying is that, you know, the transition towards digital commerce was already happening, but really the pandemic is something that's accelerating that transition. So it's going to happen a lot quicker. And really, when I look at all of these, it sort of says to me, it kind of re-emphasizes it is time to focus on thinking about our online customer experiences and evaluating for ourselves and think, do I have a good enough online experience for the customers for what they're going to expect? Another way to think about the whole situation of what's happening now is, you know, marketers for a long time have done a lot of research and they know that at critical life transition points, you know, people change their shopping behavior. So whether you're moving house, whether you're getting married, having children, retiring, these have always been well known as kind of big transitions. And what happens is so many things change in people's lives during these transitions that they actually, you know, reconsider their brand loyalties, and they, I guess they change their shopping behaviors, and they ultimately form new habits after they go through these transitions. And that's why marketers invest so much into trying to catch people around this time, because it does allow them then, once they've caught that person, they then have them as an ongoing and loyal customer. And if you think about what's happening right now, like COVID-19 is kind of forcing a new type of transition. So for the first time, you know, myself, and I'm sure for pretty much everyone on this call, it's been the first time you've had to work from home for 2 to 3 months straight. And obviously doing that, it's changed my consumer behavior in terms of where I shop and how I purchase and that sort of thing. But it's also changing how I work. So, you know, there's drastically reduced travel. So instead of, you know, traveling around for meetings or conferences, or, you know, the amount of international travel that used to happen, that's all been replaced with video calls, and that's now kind of normal sort of behavior. So what's interesting about that is it's changing the, you know, the behaviors for people, not just in their personal lives and how they're shopping, but it's changing the way they do business in a business sense. So it's, you know, this is the kind of transition that's going to affect both B2B companies and B2C companies. And it's not just something that's happening during this transition phase, it's something that's going to stay. You know, there's a lot of research coming out of the banks that things are more efficient when they have people working from home. So increasingly, even for B2B companies, they're going to find that their customers are expecting to do more and more online. And really kind of what's happening is, you know, market share is kind of being thrown up in the air, and it's, you know, as a result of this, you know, the people are going to reconsider their brand loyalties, the way they shop is going to shift. And so it's really up to companies to think about how are they going to protect their existing market share that they have, and also how can they try and grab some of that market share from other customers, from other competitors. And really, when we're talking about sales resilience, which is what we're focusing on today, it really comes down to keeping your customers sticky. And personalization is probably the main way you can achieve that. You know, when you have an online experience, whether it's through your website or through your marketing, when that is personalized to every single person that's interacting with your site or receiving that marketing, you feel much more natural to that person. It feels like the obvious place for them that they should be shop or purchasing. And so really that's how personalization achieves that stickiness, and it's that stickiness that's going to help protect our sales, particularly during this major transition that's coming about as a result of the pandemic. So something to ponder on. I mean, think for yourself about the stickiness of your online presence, you know, and how well do you think you're going to be able to keep customers sticky to your site as they go through this transition phase. So looking at what personalization can achieve, you know, first of all, there's research being done. So for Amazon.com, personalization drives 35% of purchases on Amazon. So if you think about that, you know, for your own business and think about what kind of a difference 35% would make, it's They kind of really are phenomenal numbers. And Netflix, 75% of what people watch is driven by recommendations on Netflix. And ultimately, it's easy for me to talk about these kind of examples of the Amazon.coms and the Netflixes of the world. But what happens is people start to have these positive experiences with these big brands, and then they start to expect that across all other channels, other brands they deal with, and across the other channels within those brands. And as a result of this kind of uplift in sales and things that people achieve, there was some research done by McKinsey and Company, and they found that for most companies, through implementing personalisation, they can see a 5 to 15% increase in revenue and a 10 to 30% increase in marketing efficiency. So it really is the kind of initiative that has a really strong and high ROI. And there's kind of two things driving that. One is obviously the top line, like driving the revenue growth and the efficiency in your marketing and that sort of stuff. But at the same time, what's happening, the cost of implementing personalisation is falling. So through people like Amazon.com. So Amazon spends $28 billion a year on R&D, and so much of that it goes into investing in kind of these recommendation engines to try and find ways to drive sales on the Amazon.com platform. But what happens is AWS then captures that technology and packages it up and makes it easy for other companies to consume that on a pay-per-use basis. So, what used to be done traditionally with sort of manual machine learning models and would take a lot longer to get into production can now be done much more efficiently and cost effectively. So that's the other thing that's kind of really driving the ROI of personalisation. So things that personalisation can achieve. So first of all is the engagement. When customers come to your site and they get an experience where the products they see are the products that are more natural for them to buy, it feels much more relevant for them. And because it's relevant, they do engage more. Similarly with the marketing, when they receive marketing from you and it's not a generic marketing email that's gone to everyone, it's been personalised to the person receiving it, it drives that engagement, that sort of ongoing engagement with your company. And as I said before, it really makes people feel at home when they're shopping and buying from you. On the product discovery front, it helps with finding new products. So sometimes when new products get added to your product range, they often don't get, it's hard for them to surface and get that initial traction. But part of what personalisation and these recommendation engines can do is help drive some of those new products to get that new adoption by being able to detect which people might be more likely to want to buy those sort of things. It also helps with ease of navigation on your site. So instead of people having to really do a lot of hard work to find what they're looking for, it kind of surfaces their interest much more quickly. So again, helping with that discovery phase. And ultimately, it's this kind of engagement and product discovery that, as we were talking about before, it helps with the stickiness of customers. That makes them sort of much more engaged and much more loyal to your brand, which in turn leads to that sales resilience that we're talking about. On the conversion front, when people are being shown products that they're interested in, they're much more likely to add those to their shopping cart, and they're much more likely to then check out. So you tend to see in these projects, an increase in conversion rate as a result of implementing personalisation. And sometimes it's just because it's easy. So because you've made it easy for someone to see a product and click add to basket and it's relevant, it again, just increases the conversion and increases the kind of the average number of products that people are putting in their basket each time they're shopping. And finally, revenue. So as a result of this increased conversion, and we spoke about it earlier. So McKinsey found 5 to 15% increase in revenue as a result of these projects. So all that comes about from that conversion increase, from increasing the average lines per order, and ultimately the sort of the average order value tends to go up as well as people are driven towards higher and higher products. And I'll give you some examples of how these recommendation engines help drive upsell as well later on in the session. So we found applications for personalisation and recommendation across a whole range of industries. So it doesn't matter whether you're B2B or B2C focused customers, there's lots of them implementing these type of projects. And we've delivered these projects for, as I mentioned previously, we've worked on industrial type companies doing wholesale distributors. They can still benefit from these recommendation engines, right through to the other extreme of telcos. So we've delivered recommendation engines for telcos. For example, we did a project with Vodafone just last year. So pretty much any company that's got some sort of e-commerce presence, they're able to apply personalisation. And that's, I guess, we'll go through some more examples of that. But also if you've got call centers. So if you have people that are on the phone receiving customer calls, and particularly in a sales function, receiving calls, just think of the experience of the sales agent on the phone. If they had a system there that's when the customer's calling them up, they're actually suggesting products to say, here's a relevant product that you should offer to the customer that's on the phone, or here's an additional product. Now they've sort of already asked for this first thing. Here's something else you can offer them as a cross sell at the same time. So call centers do a lot of, the more advanced call centers do a lot of this, applying the personalisation. It makes it easy both for the call center staff, because it's really, they don't have to know the customer intimately. They can still give really good recommendations without knowing the customer, and ultimately it leads to a better experience for the customer as well. Marketing and advertising. So there's a lot of use cases in marketing and advertising for personalisation, whether it's across emails, or whether it's across SMS messages, even to the extent of sort of retargeting campaigns and things like that. Personalisation plays a big part in I guess fundamentally what we're trying to do is increase the relevance of the messages that we send to every customer. And it's through increasing that relevance that you drive better engagement, which means better conversion rates and better click-through rates on the campaigns you're running. So marketing and advertising apply this type of technology quite a lot. In media and entertainment, anyone that's used Netflix or listened to music on Spotify would see the kind of how well these algorithms can actually detect what you might be interested in and what you might like. But also in sort of the more traditional media, if you've got any sort of content, right, and you're trying to work out what's the right content to be showing to each person that you're each of your customers or each of your visitors, recommendations can help highlight the most relevant content to the person that's looking at the site at that given time. So we see a lot of use cases in media and entertainment as well. And lastly, in travel and hospitality. So I've worked previously in the online travel industry, and again, a lot of the you imagine in online travel the amount of choice that people have in terms of which hotel they might stay at or which flight they take. The choice is actually overwhelming, and it's only through recommendation engines that you start to help the customer find the product that might be most relevant for them. So again, a lot of use cases we've seen in implementing personalisation and recommendation in travel and hospitality as well. So really, I guess the key takeaway from this is, it's the kind of technology that actually almost runs across industry. So, although I've got a couple of industry examples here, it's also anyone that's running sort of online or call centers or doing email campaigns. There's applications for personalisation there. And really what we're trying to do is trying to personalise not just in one spot, but personalise across the whole user journey. And the better you do this across the whole user journey, what we find is that's what tends to drive the much bigger uplift in customer loyalty. So, what's happened is people have these great experiences with some of these big brands. And then, as I said earlier, they start to expect that from every company they're dealing with. And you know, when companies aren't applying the same level of sophistication, it can actually start to feel a bit like the company's a bit out of touch, or it's older technology, and it's more likely then that people will sort of go and look for other competitors that they might be able to get a better experience with. So when we're talking about some of the areas we can do it across the user journey, first is, you know, product recommendations. So that's the classic example of if you hit a site and it's suggesting the products that you might be interested in, or it's, you know, activities. So monitoring, you know, what sort of products people show some sort of interest in or some sort of liking around, and using that to help drive relevant suggestions to people, whether it's, as I said, content or music or whatever else. So this is probably the one that people are most familiar with. But there's also a lot of stuff happening in search personalization. So, you know, rather than everyone coming to your site having exactly the same experience when they do a search, it's about narrowing that down so you're seeing relevant search results for the person that's that's doing the query at the time. And then if you look on the marketing side across emails and personalized notifications, whether that's you know, SMS campaigns or app notifications, there's a lot that can be done to personalize those. So I was giving the examples earlier. If you're sending an email message, rather than, you know, sending the same email out to every single customer, it's much more powerful when you actually send a personalized email that's actually got some recommendations that that customer is more likely to engage with. You know, so we see a lot of companies starting to do some of this on the marketing side as well. One of the recent projects we did, we actually implemented not just product recommendation, but we're implementing recommendation for promotions. So we're helping customers find the promotions that they might be more likely to interact with. And again, we're finding that through doing that, you're driving a much bigger uplift in the number of people who are actually taking advantage of those promotions, which then starts to make people, you know, increasing the number of times they're transacting with you in a month, which is ultimately, again, driving that sales resilience. So what I wanted to do now was jump into a few examples, and these examples are from you know, consumer websites, because they're the easiest for me to screenshot and show you. But really what this is about is trying to inspire you, and as you're going through, think about how these same concepts could apply to your site and to your marketing campaigns. And although these are B2C, anyone that's got a business-to-business website, as I said before, we're just doing a project right now with a wholesale distributor who's using exactly this type of technology. So the first area is in product discovery. So in this case, I've hit the Amazon.com homepage, and straight away it's pulling up, you know, my orders, because I've had to go back there previously and find receipts and things. So it knows that I often end up in your orders. And electronics, it knows that's the category that I typically look at when I'm going to Amazon.com. So making it really easy for me to drill into. So what's interesting here is you can recommend not just products, but also categories or sections of your site or things like that, that really you're trying to help people navigate around your site and make it easier and quicker for them to find what they're looking for. This can also manifest through things like featured categories. So, you know, instead of just highlighting the categories that might be your top sellers, which is probably what most people we find are doing, what they actually do is you start to show the categories that are of most interest to the person that's looking. Recommended for you, this tends to be a sort of a section where you're recommending products, and you tend to be able to use this across lots of places in your site. So it might be on the homepage, you might have some recommendations for the person, or you might have it in the My Account section, or you might have it even in the checkout page where people are quite far down the funnel, and then you hit them with one more sort of really targeted recommendation. So, you know, all these kind of things really helps drive your conversion rate of your site. Yeah, because what you're doing is you're taking, for every visitor that turns up, you're giving them a much better chance of them liking something and engaging with that, and then ultimately buying it. So this is all kind of about driving conversion rate. The next area can be used is driving upsell. So again, on Amazon.com, I was recently shopping for a home theater receiver, and Amazon will give me a suggestion saying, for customers who view this item, here are some other options of things they've viewed. And you'll notice that the prices are slightly more expensive than the product that I was looking at the time. So kind of what they're doing is giving me that this is exactly the upsell opportunity. I'm on the product page and they're trying to sell me on getting something slightly more expensive. So this obviously drives your average order value, increasing that through implementing this kind of upsell technology. Cross-sell is another really big one. In this case, for shopping for the home theater cable to wire up the speakers, it's suggesting the banana plugs that you use to terminate the end of the cable. And again, when you look at this, it almost feels so obvious that this is the type of thing you do. But again, it's the combination of all these different things that end up, as I said before, driving 35% of Amazon's business. So, when you start doing techniques like this and doing the frequently bought together things to drive cross-sell, ultimately what you end up doing is increasing the number of lines per order. And for quite a few of our customers, what we've seen is that they can get people to their site and they can get them to add sort of one product to their shopping cart or two products to their shopping cart. But that the incremental gain they get from just adding sort of just even on average a fraction of an item, increasing the average order value ends up in quite a big outcome to the business. And I guess ultimately when you add all of this up, what you end up doing is increasing the amount of revenue you're earning for every visitor that comes to your site. And that means in terms of your marketing efficiency, all of a sudden your marketing efficiency goes up because for the same marketing dollars, you're actually earning a lot more revenue. And with that increased marketing efficiency, you can then often reinvest that into more marketing, which drives more visitors. So you end up with this almost virtuous cycle of driving growth through your site. If we move on and start looking at personalized search, here's an example of 2 Netflix pages from my household. And no, I don't personally have a secret love affair with romantic comedies. This is my wife's Netflix profile. But one was my kids, one was my wife's. And when you look at this again, it almost looks obvious and it looks exactly like what you'd expect. That the kids will see cartoons and my wife sees romantic comedies. But when our customers come to our B2B sites or even our other sites, we don't do this for them. We don't personalize their search to make it easy to find the stuff that's relevant. And just think what would happen, right? If my kids were shown the romantic comedies instead, they'd be so less engaged with the platform and much less likely to sort of, show that loyalty to watching Netflix as they've been doing. So really, leading companies are doing this. They're taking it when people are doing the searching on their site, they're then reordering those results so that the relevant stuff hits up the top. And as I said, that drives loyalty from those customers. And it also drives repeat purchases because they keep coming back to the site because they're having such a great experience. If we move on and look at the marketing side now. So we kind of covered the on-site behaviors before, but now if we move to, I guess, further up the funnel where we're trying to market and get people to our e-commerce site in the first place. So here's an example of an email. So I was preparing this presentation. I thought, surely I've got a personalized email I can find to use as an example. And this is one of the first ones that came up. So Pinterest, I don't even remember going there, but they detected that I was looking for presentation design because I was preparing a presentation and information on company profiles. And, so, you can imagine, compare that and contrast that experience of getting a personalized suggestion like that via email versus someone getting the same generic email that's been sent to every other customer that you've got. This example here is going to drive a lot more interest in what you're doing. So what tends to happen is by putting the personalization in the subject line, so you can see here they've sort of called out my name, but then called out the things I was interested in, presentation design and company profiles in the subject. So that first step actually drives your open rates of your email up. So you've got a lot more people actually looking at your email in the first place. And then by, same thing, keeping the content in the email relevant to me, that's then driving the click-through, right? And getting more people to the site. And ultimately, once they're there, is driving kind of conversion. So, this kind of stuff is surprisingly not that hard to do now that we have this kind of recommendation technology. And again, it makes a big difference in your marketing. SMS is another example. In this case, we've got, I got a message from Telstra. My phone was coming up to the end of contract. And this is basically a very similar project to what we delivered with Vodafone. But basically, they know I'm an Android user, so they're suggesting another relevant phone that I might be interested in. Or similarly, app notifications. If you've got a mobile app that's got a choice of notifications it can send, personalization can make sure you're sending the right message to the right person at the right time. And like ultimately, it's a combination of all these things that, as I was talking about earlier, when it comes to marketing efficiency, these are the things that help, help drive, that click-through rates and ultimately improve your marketing efficiency. I want to touch on, sales and discounting and coupons. So, often people will run a campaign. There might be like in this case, I'll give an example of a 20% off coupon. And these can be good at driving volume. But another way to make them even more effective is to add a personalization element as well. So by adding not just the coupon or the discount message that's in the email, you're also including products that are relevant to the person that's receiving the email. And all of a sudden, you've kind of got this 1-2 combo where people are hit with kind of the price and the relevance levers. And all of a sudden, what that does is it actually really increases, again, the conversion rate of people that are, or the click-through rate of people jumping and going from that email and coming to your site. The challenge, obviously, with across-the-board discounting like this is it really eats into your margin. So another tactic that people do is personalizing loss leaders. So instead of offering generic, discounting across the whole product range, you can actually offer a bigger discount across just a single product or a couple of recommended products. And ultimately, this tends to work effectively where you've got people that once they're in your store, if they buy something, they'll then buy a bunch of other things as well. So you can offer that loss leader that really, by giving a really good discount, drives a lot of people to take up that offer and get them to your site. But then at the same time, you're actually protecting your margin because they're going to add the rest of the products they normally buy to their shopping cart as well. So there's people achieving a fair bit of success with things like this. Actually, if you're interested, I've got some case studies on this type of tactic. So feel free to send me an email and I can forward you a link to some of those case studies. So if we look at some of the technology behind the scenes and how it works at a high level. So Amazon Personalise is one such product that, Amazon.com has done all that R&D over so many years and has now developed that into a service that you can consume. So what's also great is this is a service that's just been released into Australia in the last 2 months. So you can now do this keeping all your customer data in the country. It doesn't have to leave and go overseas. We're actually a launch partner for Amazon Personalise in Australia, so we've got quite some good connections here with Amazon. So fundamentally, what it does is it takes a bunch of input data. It runs some algorithms on that data to try and look for the common patterns across what your customers are buying, and sort of for the individual what their customer journey looks like in terms of what they're interested in, but also finding those similar micro segments of people that are showing similar behaviors, and it's using those micro segments then to offer something relevant to every group. And the way it does that is by making available sort of in most common sense an API. So whoever's your sort of web or system developer or your whoever runs your marketing software, they can hook up to this API and for each user, they can query it and say, tell me what's the best product, or tell me what's the best promotion to offer to this person that I'm trying to serve. And fundamentally, when you look at the input data that's required, the main thing you need is some sort of connection between a user and something they've purchased in the past. So that's the only required data you need. And for anyone that's got sort of an ERP system that's tracked their sales over the years, you've got enough data to get started with something like Amazon Personalise. And what you tend to find is you kind of can get pretty decent results just out of that data set, even if you've got nothing else at that point in time. You can then improve the quality of recommendations by feeding more data in the algorithm. So, first part is getting more data on your product catalog. So understanding some more, what brand it is or what color the item is and things like that helps the algorithm finding those similarities. And similarly on your users, the more information you got against the users, the more it helps the algorithm find those micro segments. So whether it's, people's age or their gender or whatever else, those things all help in refining and come out with really good recommendations. So fundamentally, I guess the key change is that today, it really is a lot cheaper to implement personalisation than it was previously. With our team of data science, we've rolled our own personalised and recommendation modules for a long time. But the great thing about something like Amazon Personalise is it kind of takes a lot of that heavy lifting away, so we can focus on kind of the analysis around what it's doing instead of the nuts and bolts of implementing it and how it gets hooked up. So I want to touch on some of the mistakes that people often make when they're getting started with personalisation. We've implemented a lot of these projects and kind of designed our methodology around how you sort of overcome some of these mistakes. But what I want to do is actually share them with you, just so if you are embarking on one, you've got sort of a good understanding of some of the things to think about. So the first area is in terms of the technology. So people often look at these projects and they think it's a technology project, and so that's where they start trying to generate recommendations and things like that. But what you actually need to do is start from the user journey. You need to map out, and what we typically do is we'll get in a boardroom and we'll print out your sequence of your email campaigns that you run, and we'll print out your whole website and the flow that of the user journey through your website, because what you're trying to do is map that whole user journey and find all the touch points where recommendation engines could add value in that mix. And although there's subtle differences in the different places you put these recommendation modules, you actually need to generate different recommendations for different purposes. So the examples I was giving earlier where we're talking about upsell versus cross-sell versus product recommendation versus promo recommendation, it's not one engine that's doing all of that work. You tend to need to build different recommendation engines for different purposes throughout your site. And that's why it's so critical. You've got to start with that user journey so that you can map out exactly what you need the machine learning to do. And look, I know I've called this out with personalisation, but it's the same challenge we find across any machine learning implementation we do, is that defining that problem up front and linking it to how the machine learning is going to solve that problem is sort of one of the most critical steps that a lot of people that are new to data science tend to skip over. The next thing is, people can kind of see it purely as a software implementation. It's a service they could go and consume from Amazon. So the software developers think I could just consume that and build it into the site. And it's true, they could build it into the site, but what we're really conscious of here is we're actually trying to drive a business result and drive some performance. So the data scientist role will be in trying to look at and run experiments and try different sets of data that, I was talking about the additional user data or the different product features, bringing those into the algorithm and running experiments to find which are the ones that actually make a difference to the recommendations, and how that translates into the business results. So So to get the best results out of it, you have to sort of concentrate on some of the analysis around it as well. And that's not just in the development phase, but it's also then once you've actually deploying things out into your site or into your marketing campaigns. A lot of people will jump straight in and just kind of set and forget. We'll deploy it and then leave it. But what you need to do in the first instance is do some A/B testing. So, compare it against the existing modules. So for a lot of people in their site, they'll have, the most popular products will be what they call up as their featured section. So if you're replacing that most popular products with recommendations, then you want to be testing them, right? And seeing which one's performing better. And that will help you fine tune the algorithm. And similarly, once it's in production, you want to have some metrics around it. So for example, monitoring the click-through rate on the recommendations, and monitoring the conversion rate, and ultimately seeing how that's driving revenue is important to have to monitor these things ongoing. Another common one we get when we first come into client sites is we often work with people who've got a lot of experience in their domains, and they know their products so well that they want to define the rules of what this engine needs to do. And sometimes they end up trying to put so many constraints around and business rules around the engine that you don't let the engine do its work. So really what you've got to do is actually almost step back and get out of the way of the recommendation engine. And what you tend to find is the technology is so good at finding the things that are relevant for people. Once you let the engine do what it's designed to do, it will find things that are actually better than what the subject matter expert would be able to find. And typically we'll deliver MVPs for people, and they'll and go through an exercise of validating the recommendations to kind of prove how good they actually are. I guess the last mistake is people not getting started. So, we'd hear things like we aren't ready because we haven't got enough data or whatever other reason. And fundamentally, you actually don't need, you do need a lot of data, but most people have already got the data that's required to get started with a recommendation engine. And the thing is with machine learning in general, it's starting to infiltrate more and more parts of businesses. And the only way for businesses to start to understand how to implement machine learning projects and to be able to spot new opportunities for new applications of machine learning in their business, you've got to get started. You've got to start, running proof of concepts and getting some of this technology embedded in your business. And that's when you then sort of almost tuned your eye to be able to spot the other opportunities. So kind of not getting started is another sort of mistake that people can make. So lastly, before we jump to questions, how to get started. With us, there's a couple of things we can offer. First of all, a complimentary discovery workshop. So, if you're just trying to understand how you might be able to benefit from personalization and recommendation, we can offer a free workshop to come and do with you. Or similarly, if it's not even personalization, across any of the other machine learning solutions, we can really help figure out how that solution might be able to drive a strong return on investment for your business. Or we can also help and run a proof of value. So I should call out, we were the launch partner for Personalise. We're the only launch partner in the whole APAC region for this product. And what that means is we're actually pre-approved for some co-funding. So this proof of value, normally this is about a $12,500 engagement, but with the pre-approved co-funding from Amazon Web Services, it sort of brings the cost down to only $5,000. And ultimately what we do is we'll bring a principal consultant in, we'll review kind of all the different potential applications on the user journey for where you might be able to use personalization. We'll actually do a run of Amazon Personalise using your data. So again, your subject matter experts can start to see the kind of quality of the recommendations and sort of get confidence that it's going to make a difference. And also you can start doing some of the A/B testing against your existing methods on your site. And we also do training. So we'll spend a little bit of time doing sort of the fundamentals of how personalization and recommendation work. But then a lot of it's also the hands-on side-by-side training where we're sitting down next to your team and they're getting that hands-on experience and understanding what we're doing. So so this is a sort of a great initiative that is supported by Amazon Web Services and makes a big difference. So So look, as I promised, I wanted to leave plenty of time for comments. So I think we're running right on time. So that was all the content I had. I'm going to jump into the Q&A session now and have a look at what questions we've got here. So first one I've got here. So the question is, was that increase by McKinsey captured in Australia, or is that a global view? It's in that particular article, it was a global view, but it's it's fairly indicative of what you could expect even in Australia as well. Finish that one. Next question. We all mostly like a good recommendation engine, but still so basic. Only takes your daughter to accidentally use your Netflix account for the engine to be stuffed. When do you feel we'll get the ability to correct our engine? So one of the things when you're designing not just recommendations, but any sort of machine learning system and trying to figure out where you use that in the user journey, you try to design it to be fault tolerant. And what I mean by that is you don't just give someone a single recommendation, you give them a selection of recommendations. And that means that even if one recommendation is not right, then chances are the person can still find something else in that list that's relevant. So, one of the customers we worked with recently wanted to use recommendation to basically take the recommendations from Amazon Personalised and drop those products straight in the shopping cart so that all the customer had to do was come to the site and hit checkout and they were done. Which it sounds good in theory, but what you end up doing is having a negative user experience because you're, even if your product that you've added to the cart is slightly wrong, you've made it much more frustrating for the customer to have to sort of take that out of the shopping basket. So, so the way we come about it is not solving the problem you're asking, is not so much about how you sort of correct the engine, but how you design the user interface to allow for some fault tolerance in the recommendations. Can you please share a use case using Amazon Personalised for any client? Thanks. That's anonymous. We're doing these projects in Australia with clients in Australia. I don't have one that's on the website where I'm allowed to disclose the clients' names at the moment. But once we do have that case study, I'm happy to share it and send that out. So I'm not sure who asked that question, but if you send me an email as soon as we've got the case study that we're allowed to publish the company's name, then I'll make sure I get that case study out to you. Next question, who are the competitors to Amazon Personalise? So a lot of the big cloud providers will all have their own personalization and recommendation engines. So, Microsoft and Google would have similar products. Then there's also sort of non-big cloud providers that have got products as well. So yeah, I guess there's a whole selection out there. I guess the advantage with Amazon.com, they've got all that, because they run a retail business on one side of the company, they've got all the development and R&D that's gone into that then builds the kind of the strength of the Amazon Personalised engine. It works for most cases, and we find it does a good job for most cases. But for cases where it doesn't, we can also build custom machine learning models. So depending on exactly what type of recommendation and problem you're trying to solve, Amazon Personalised won't work for everything, and sometimes we do have to implement a custom machine learning solution instead. What's your thoughts on balancing the short-term reward and lifetime value? E.g., too much recommendation might lead to unsubscription. How do you build this into the algorithm mechanism? So balancing short-term reward versus the lifetime value. I guess for some of the way the engine works is it looks at what you're doing, what your interest is showing at a particular time. So if you've been clicking through to the site and viewing a particular product, The fact that you showed interest in a different product a month ago, it stops kind of showing you that and starts to put a bit more emphasis on the stuff that you're looking in the short term. But the algorithms actually do try to ensure a bit of variety in the results. So you're trying to actually find sort of a combination. And going back again to that fault tolerant UX, you're not just showing them one thing that might not be perfect. You're actually showing them a selection. So that's how you kind of, I guess, the algorithm itself almost balances that. It also, the algorithms try to, highlight new products. And I guess this is where some of the advantage of the algorithms learn from what other customers are doing. So not just it doesn't just train on one customer, it trains across the whole customer set. So where other customers discover a new product and that customer happens to be similar to yourself, then what you'll start to see is suggestions from what the other customer's interested in. So that's kind of how they, I guess, keep the novelty factor as well of bringing new products in. So they're not, they're not purely just showing these are the most popular products you've ever purchased for that particular user. They're taking all these factors and blending it across the whole customer base. All right, next question. What sort of exploit balancing algorithms have been approved and most successful or effective? Look, I'm not a data scientist, so I won't try to get into the different types of algorithms. My role is more as a delivery lead. So if you want to be blown away by an answer, we'd need one of our data scientists or senior data scientists to answer on the technical algorithm front. But what I will say is Amazon Personalise that tends to be more sort of pre-packaged, and they've developed a lot of the algorithms. So we have some control over the hyperparameters that we can set in this. So let's say, for example, you're trying to put some more emphasis on new products. And historically, a lot of the problem with new products is that if you're only showing your top sellers, then new products never get a chance in. So we have some control and can choose algorithms that are more biased towards finding sort of new products and then surfacing new products and getting traction in those. So there is that's again some of that sort of data science exercise I guess we go through when we're working on these projects. Great. All right, well, look, that's all the questions in the Q&A. So look, thank you to everyone for your time today. As I said, feel free to reach out. Happy to set up a sort of a free discovery workshop, and whether it's in personalisation and recommendation or whether it's in other areas as well, more than happy to come and work with you on that. Or take a look at that proof of value offering as well, because it really is a nicely packaged up engagement that's quite effective. So thanks once again for your time, and yeah, hope to hear from you soon. Thank you guys. Bye.